Just giving people a couple seconds to jump on. Thanks for the love. Happy Thursday, everyone. Hope you had a great day. I'm definitely looking forward to Friday, even though this was a short week. So I want to get started in just a few minutes, but I just wanted to see if anyone else was going to hop on. But we got a nice crowd going, and feel free to share this with anyone who you think could benefit from this message. So definitely spread the word. Roman says to show off my new phone. No, I haven't set it up yet, but I did just get the new iPhone 12 Pro. So these, I'm going to be upgrading my video, my live skills. All right, guys. So you all hopped on right on time. So I want to honor you for doing that. Gato, I'll show it to you after. It's pretty nice though. I know I'm so fancy with my new phone. So you guys all joined on time. So I want to thank you for that, first of all, for, just giving me this space to talk about things that I love talking about. And this topic is particularly close to my heart. It actually gets me really, really revved up, and I can, be on my soapbox for hours just talking about this. But what we're going to be talking about today is how to know when you're fertile AF and when you're not. And I wanted to do this live because I wanted to do a little preview for those of you who maybe want more in-depth information about this topic, but I wanted to do a little teaser because I obviously want you guys to listen to the podcast. So episode 15 of the podcast, Point Blank Period podcast, my baby, is live now. You can find it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And I highly recommend that you go over, subscribe, rate, review, and definitely download episode 15, which is all about, which I go into in everything we're going to be talking about tonight, but in much more detail. So again, thanks for being here. I hope you guys enjoy this information, and please, please, please share this live with anyone who you think could benefit from this information. Share the podcast, download the podcast. Leave me a review, a 5-star review if you feel so inclined, because the more reviews we have, the more feedback I get, the more the algorithm works in my favor. So in our favor, right? So thank you guys for being here and for supporting me. Love you. Okay, so tonight's live, we're talking about how to know when you're fertile AF and when you're not. And we're going to be answering 3 questions. So the first question we're going to be answering is, what are the 3 fertile signs? So if you're a woman or a person with female physiology in your reproductive years, you can observe 3 signs of fertility. And these 3 things that we're going to go over will indicate to you, will give you some really important information about your overall health, but particularly your reproductive health. And by learning these signs and learning how to interpret them, you will be able to determine whether on any given day of your menstrual cycle you are fertile, or if your uterus is closed for business, at least for the remainder of that month, right? So I feel like this is really important and valuable information to get out there, especially for younger women, because I don't know about you, if you're a woman listening to this, but I certainly got the message from sex ed and even long after that I could get pregnant any day of my cycle, that if I wanted to avoid pregnancy, I had to be taking some kind of continuous form of birth control, the pill, patch, injections, IUD, something that was continuous, something that I could rely on, and that wasn't risky. And so I feel like for that reason, natural birth control methods, fertility awareness methods, which is basically the umbrella under which we're talking about, under which everything that we're talking about tonight falls under, those options get a really bad rep. And that's just not fair, because while I'm not anti-birth control or anti-hormonal birth control, I am pro-informed consent. It's very important that when you're considering what the best birth control option is for you, that you know what the risks are, what the rewards are, what the potential side effects are, what the outcomes are, how they affect your future fertility, etc., etc. So we're going to be talking about what the 3 fertile signs are. You are going to be able to answer, well, caveat, if you're currently on birth control and this is the first you're learning about this, do not interpret what I'm about to say as a substitute for advice from a licensed clinical healthcare professional or someone who is trained in natural birth control methods, cycle tracking, and fertility awareness, right? This is not a course on fertility awareness. This is for informational purposes only. So if you're on birth control and you're using a particular method, do not stop using it just to, implement what I'm talking about tonight, okay? Caveat, be careful. Informed consent, of course, but do your research and consult someone who knows what they're talking about. I am not a doctor. I'm not a healthcare professional. I'm just someone who is interested in bringing this information to the masses. Okay? So I guess a better way to frame this is that we're going to be talking tonight about what the 3 fertile signs are and touching on the question, how do I know when I'm fertile? When am I fertile, and when am I no longer fertile? So we're going to be discussing what happens in that fertile window, what you're looking at, how to interpret what it means, what it means that you, what is meant by what you are observing physically. Okay, so why should you care about this? I kind of already touched on this, but this is important because you have a right to know when it's safe to have unprotected sex without birth control, right? You have the right to be able to make those decisions, you and your partner together. You have a right to know. You have the right to know that you can't get pregnant every single day of your cycle and that there are alternatives to the conventional birth control options. You have a right to know when it isn't safe to have unprotected sex if you are trying to avoid pregnancy. And you also have the right to know what your fertile signs are when you are fertile in the event that you are actually trying to conceive, because knowing this can save you a whole lot of time, a whole lot of energy, and potentially a whole lot of heartache. Because if you're not having sex at the right times, the likelihood that the sperm is going to meet the egg is very small. So knowing this information is critical if you are actually actively trying to conceive. Okay? So you should also care about this because natural birth control, fertility awareness, tracking your fertile signs, knowing your fertile window, when it opens and when it closes, is an alternative to hormonal birth control or the hormonal IUD or other barrier methods that you may not want to be using if you're in a committed monogamous relationship but are not looking to have a baby at this point in time. You're also going to learn how to understand your body better. So knowing how the ebbs and flows of the cycle, knowing what's normal, what's not. And the good thing is once you know how to interpret this, you can take this information to your healthcare provider, to your doctor, and actually have a conversation with them and say, well, I think this is what's supposed to be happening, but I'm not really sure. I think something's wrong here because, maybe, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but you begin to be able to see that something might not be quite right. Okay? And then again, like I already said, if you don't know your fertile window and you're trying to conceive, you could be totally mistiming when you're having sex, thinking that the more sex the better, sex every other day, sex multiple times a day. You could be burning yourself out and putting all this pressure on yourself to have all the sex all the time. But if you're not timing it correctly, you're not going to be successful. So that is why I think this stuff is important. So I clearly feel really strongly about this. I'm very passionate about it. So let's hope I can sustain this passion through the rest of today's live. So thanks for those of you for sticking with me. Let's get into it, okay? So your fertile signs. The 3 fertile signs are cervical fluid or cervical mucus. I know, get over the word. I'm going to use mucus a lot. A lot of people have an issue with that. It's just like the word moist, okay? Let's get over it. We're all adults here, okay? Cervical mucus, number 1. Basal body temperature is the second fertile sign, and your cervical position, literally the position that your cervix is in at any given time over the course of your cycle. So those are the three fertile signs. Those are the things that that actually shift over the course of your cycle and determine when you are fertile and when you are not. And observing these signs in unison together, this trifecta of signs, is going to give you the best possible information, the best possible, what's the word I'm looking for? The best possible information that you can have to know whether you're fertile or not. So these three signs in conjunction, considered all together, are going to give you that best feedback. All right, so let's talk about cervical mucus first. That's probably my favorite. And cervical mucus is what it is it's a hydrogel that is produced by your cervix and is actually a very critical component to helping to keep sperm alive. Helping to keep sperm alive for up to 5 days in your cervix. So cervical mucus changes over the course of your fertile period. So after your menstruation ends, after your period ends, you tend to have a couple of dry days where you're not really seeing any sort of discharge or mucus. But after that, as estrogen levels begin to rise in concentration, right, you're getting closer to ovulation, which is the big event of your cycle, right, when an egg is released from the ovary. You're going to begin to see a kind of dry, flaky mucus that's more like dried glue or paste on a piece of paper. And as your mucus becomes more fertile, as you become more fertile, your mucus shifts from being kind of dry and flaky to being creamy like hand lotion to being more lubricative and stretchy. So I don't know if any of my ladies out there have ever had this experience where maybe you're getting close to ovulation and maybe you're halfway through your cycle, like a week and a half, 2 weeks, maybe less from when your period ended, and you stand up kind of fast and you feel like this rush of water and you're like, oh my God, did I get my period again? And then you run to the bathroom, right? But you realize it's just like this wetness, this like sensation, this lubricative sensation, and maybe you feel it when you wipe. That is very fertile cervical mucus. That is not your period. You didn't pee yourself. That is cervical mucus, and it serves a very important purpose, like I said, to help keep sperm alive for up to 5 days. It also helps to actually make sperm capable of fertilizing an egg. If sperm do not swim through, are not filtered through cervical mucus, they literally can't make it to the egg to fertilize it, and they aren't capable of doing it. The cervical mucus literally enables them to be able to do that. So, interesting fact. Okay, so with cervical mucus, you're going to experience a wet sensation, and it's going to get progressively wetter as you continue to become more fertile. So once you observe cervical mucus, whether it's dry, flaky, creamy, lubricative, you have to assume that you are fertile. So if you're trying to avoid pregnancy, you're not going to want to have unprotected sex during any time that you observe cervical mucus, okay? So it's in some ways it's as simple as that. Obviously it's more complex, but basically if you observe cervical mucus, no matter what form it takes, you have to consider yourself fertile and therefore abstain from unprotected sex. And if you don't see it, then you're not fertile. So in other words, if you don't see cervical mucus, you are not fertile, and therefore you could have all the unprotected sex in the world and you would not have a baby. Again, this is obviously very simplified. There's a lot that goes into this, but I just want to give you guys, I just want to plant this seed for you, no pun intended, actually pun intended, that you are not fertile every single day, and that there are actual physical signs that you can observe and interpret to determine whether you are fertile or not. Okay, so continuing to speak about cervical mucus. So as estrogen levels peak, mucus begins to dry up. So when you are about to ovulate, right after you ovulate, it's often within like 12 to 24 hours after you ovulate, the cervical mucus literally dries up and forms a plug in your cervix that literally blocks any sperm from coming through, from penetrating the cervix. And your vagina, because of its acidity, it actually kills any remaining sperm. So once that mucus plug is formed, once that egg has been released, once you're no longer seeing any cervical mucus, you literally are no longer fertile. Uterus is closed for business. You can have all the unprotected sex you want and not worry about getting pregnant. Again, if you are in the business of getting pregnant, you're trying to conceive, sometimes it's not ideal to wait until the day that you ovulate and try to time sex so precisely, because sometimes you can miss it. And so that's why once you start to observe cervical mucus and you know that you are approaching ovulation and you know that cervical mucus is a power, like it's a power source that literally can preserve sperm for up to 5 days in your cervix. So when you ovulate, there's still a possibility of you getting pregnant, right? That is why it's so important to start observing and understanding and knowing how to interpret your cervical mucus. So when you know that, you can time sex much more accurately if you're trying to get pregnant, and you have a much better chance of actually conceiving than if you are, going for that day 14 myth, like all women, ovulate on day 14. That is so untrue. It's as untrue as the fact that you can get pregnant every day. Not all women ovulate on day 14. So when doctors, healthcare professionals with our best interest in mind are telling us to have sex on day 14, it's not doing us any good, because if we're not actually ovulating on that day, if we're not actually seeing cervical mucus on those days, we could have all the sex that we want on day 14 from day to night and not conceive. So again, that's why this is so important, because it liberates us from worrying about getting pregnant and worrying about not getting pregnant. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but if you're ovulating regularly, you have regular cycles, you're regularly seeing mucus, you're observing these other signs, and you're timing sex correctly, then you're more likely to conceive, okay? And I think a lot of times women end up, falling for these myths that are just so continuously perpetuated that they get themselves in a situation where they haven't conceived after 6, 8, 10 cycles, and they're beginning to wonder if there's something wrong with them. There's not necessarily something wrong with them. There could be, of course, but it could be that they're just timing things incorrectly and they don't understand how to interpret their fertile signs, okay? So that is cervical mucus. So let's move on to our second fertile sign, which is basal body temperature. So this is literally your body temperature, like the temperature on the inside of your body. Normally, during the first half of your cycle, your temperature is going to be somewhere between 97 and 97.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Once you ovulate, your body temperature actually begins to rise, and it will stay elevated for the second half of your cycle, and then drops again right before you have your period. If you were to get pregnant, your temperature would stay elevated for basically the duration of your pregnancy until right before you're about to give birth. Interesting fact, right? So this change in your basal body temperature indicates that progesterone, the heat-inducing hormone, has taken over. So the first half of your cycle, estrogen is the dominant hormone. The second half, progesterone is the dominant hormone. And progesterone is actually a progestation hormone, and it's actually your body literally heats up on the inside to help gestate a potential embryo. Interesting, right? So this is a sign. So your basal body temperature shifts is technically not something to be relied on to determine your fertile window exclusively. It's usually taught as something that will help you to confirm ovulation and will help you to define and refine your fertile window based on observations of mucus as well. So it's not a fertile sign in and of itself. It just indicates that you are healthy, you are ovulating as you should be, and that's what's going to be indicated by that temperature shift. So once you know roughly when you're ovulating, right, after a couple of cycles, you begin to notice that clear shift in temperature, because the day after you ovulate, if you're tracking your body temperature at the same time every single day, which is how you should be doing it, you're going to see a significant jump, maybe like 0.4 of a degree, which is significant, and you're actually going to be able to see, in a bird's eye view, that your temperatures are pretty stable in the lower range for the first half and pretty stable in the higher range in the second half. So once you know that, you've observed that over a few cycles, then again, this is a great resource if you're trying to conceive, because you know, okay, I actually ovulate on day 18 or day 19 as opposed to day 14, which is what my doctor told me. But now that I track my fertile signs, I'm looking at my mucus, I'm seeing when my mucus completely dries up, and I'm seeing when I'm able to observe a shift in my body temperature. I know that I'm ovulating, and I know that it's more or less on, day 16, day 17, whatever the case may be. So it's very interesting to play detective and investigator with your own body, and to be able to kind of determine, okay, when's it safe, to have unprotected sex, when's it not, and kind of like, track that and see shifts over time and see patterns developing. It's interesting, to say the least. So that was so waking basal body temperature is your second fertile sign. So I say waking because I think most people who utilize a fertility awareness method that includes measuring their basal body temperature tend to do it first thing in the morning. I for one, keep the thermometer right next to my bed. So the first thing I do before I even get up to pee is I take my temperature and I record that, so I know exactly where I am on any given day. And it's true, you see a pattern over time. So that's a fun thing to do. And it makes it easy, because then, if you wait and you do it later in the day, you could have an inaccurate reading, number one, or you could, if you're doing it, at different times every single day, it's not going to be as accurate as it would be if you're doing it at the same time every single day. All right, so that was fertile sign number 2. Fertile sign number 3 is your cervical position, literally the position that your cervix is in. So your cervix, for those of you who may not know, is the lower part of your uterus that actually extends into your vagina. So it's something that if you stick your fingers up inside your vagina, which is something that I recommend all women do, because it's time that it's high time that we became less squeamish about knowing the intimate parts of ourselves and knowing our own bodies, because we're too old for that, right? We are grown women who are having unprotected sex, or considering having a family, and that's why we're learning this method, right? So we should get over the fact that, we should get over the idea of, sticking our fingers in our vagina to check our cervical position, because if it's going to help us to understand when we're fertile and when we're not, and, be able to achieve our family planning goals without having to use hormonal contraceptives, then I think it's a small price to pay, right? Who's with me? Send me some love. Okay, cervical position. Like I said, the cervix is the lower part of your uterus that extends into your vagina, and it actually takes many forms over the course of your cycle. Thanks for the love, guys. So when you are around ovulation, around the time that you are ovulating, right, in your fertile period, your cervix literally transforms into, I'm going to borrow this language from Tony Weschler, the OG, author of Taking Charge of Your Fertility, a biological gate through which sperm can freely flow and get into the cervix to potentially fertilize an egg. So your cervix it's like a drawbridge, kind of, if you want to think about it that way. So During ovulation, in your fertile period, the drawbridge is down and any sperm can get through. In your non-fertile phase, it is closed for business, right? You can't get past the moat, right? You can't get into the castle. Not going to happen. So right around the time, so right after you menstruate, right before estrogen kind of starts to increase in concentration, you're approaching ovulation in maybe a week to 10 days. You could put your fingers up inside to feel your cervix, and you will notice that it's firm, low, and closed, and not wet. So it's more like the feeling if you were to touch the tip of your nose. However, the closer you get to ovulation, when you are in your fertile phase, when your mucus, your cervical mucus, which we already discussed, is going from dry, flaky, creamy, so it's like kind of on a graph like this. So starts off the least fertile cervical mucus, dry and flaky, more fertile, creamy, most fertile, lubricative, and stretchy. Like you could literally stretch it between your fingers. That's when your cervix demonstrates the acronym SHOW: soft, high, open, wet. So around your fertile period, your cervix is literally going to be more like, it's going to have a sensation more like the inside of your cheek. And you will have to actually stick your fingers up a little bit further to actually feel it. Whereas when you are observing your cervical position in a non-fertile period, you would not be able to, you wouldn't have to stick your fingers so high up to feel that it is closed, firm, non-wet. Okay? So again, those are the 3 fertile signs. Hopefully you learned something tonight. The 3 fertile signs, again, to recap, are cervical mucus. Again, this is cervical mucus is a hydrogel that is produced by your cervix, which is designed to keep sperm alive for up to 5 days leading up to ovulation. Again, which means that you don't have to have sex on the day you ovulate to have the best chance of conceiving. You can have sex on any day that you observe cervical mucus, or if you are not on birth control and trying to abstain from having a baby, then, or rather trying to prevent having a baby, you would abstain from unprotected sex during the time that you observe mucus. And along with mucus, in conjunction with mucus, the second fertile sign is your basal body temperature. So again, in the first half of your phase, your basal body temperature is lower because estrogen is the dominant hormone. After you ovulate and you are in the second half of your phase, the second half of your cycle, the progesterone dominant phase, your temperatures will be consistently higher. All right. And then finally, your cervical position, which again, the closer you get to ovulation, when you are in your fertile phase, your cervix will be higher, softer, higher, open, and wet, as opposed to firm, low, closed, and non-wet, which is how it is most every other day of your cycle, except that short fertile window again, which varies from woman to woman. Some women produce more mucus than others. Some women, have, more subtle shifts in their cervical position. But the reason I wanted to do this video was because I just wanted to shed some light on a very misunderstood and I guess really unexamined, misunderstood method of, birth control. It's so, kind of frowned upon because a lot of people just don't understand it. And so I wanted to do this live because I wanted to help to educate those of you out there who, maybe are looking for an alternative to hormonal birth control or, using other types of devices like IUDs and things like that just don't feel right for you for whatever reason. I want you to know that there is another option out there. And the way that you determine on any given day of your cycle, whether you're fertile or not, whether it's safe to have unprotected sex or not, if you're not trying to conceive, is by understanding, interpreting your fertile signs. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. I want to thank you guys for joining me. It's been a lot of fun to talk about this stuff. I hope, like I said, I hope you learned something. Definitely DM me if you have any further questions, or if you want me to do another video and maybe dive into this a little bit more. I was actually thinking about doing another live all about cervical mucus and actually bringing props. So like I said, cervical mucus goes from dry, flaky to creamy to lubricative. And I totally think it would be fun to like bring different like substances that can mimic the look of the mucus, to help you guys kind of understand how that works and how to read that fertile sign. Because frankly, it's my favorite, and I think it's probably the most accurate way without even needing to know your, determine your shifts in body temperature or your cervical position. It's the, I think, tried and true, I don't want to say foolproof, but almost foolproof way to determine on any given day whether you're fertile or not. So if you guys think that would be interesting, let me know. Send me some love, send me some hearts, leave a comment. So let me know what you thought. And I will see you guys again soon. And obviously, do not forget to check out the podcast, episode 15, where I dive into what I talked about tonight in a whole lot more detail. So, subscribe, rate, review the podcast. And I will talk to you guys soon. Have a great Thursday. Bye.